What if the stranger you saved in the middle of a raging desert storm wasn't just a wounded man, but the one person who would change everything you thought you knew about danger, loyalty, and love? The desert wind swept across the Arizona territory like a living thing, rustling through sagebrush and mesquite as Margaret Hayes stood at the edge of the life she never expected. The year was 1885, and at 24 she had come farther west than she ever imagined. She carried 2 old leather trunks, a heart full of stubborn courage, and the deed to a trading post left by an uncle she barely remembered. The stagecoach that had brought her from Tucson rolled away in a cloud of dust, leaving her alone with a quiet so deep it felt like another world. Hayes' trading post sat ahead of her, its adobe walls, the color of dried red clay under the hot afternoon sun. The faded wooden sign creaked in the wind. Part of her wanted to turn around and chase the stagecoach back to the life she knew. But there was no life waiting for her in Philadelphia. Only empty rooms and a future she did not want. She unlocked the door with her uncle's iron key. The hinges groaned as if warning her of what lay ahead. Inside, the air smelled of old leather, coffee beans, dried herbs, and desert dust. She ran her gloved hand across a shelf, watching dust rise in the sunbeams. Rows of canned peaches, flour sacks, bolts of calico, and ammunition filled the space. It was rough and worn, but it could be hers. "You must be Miss Hayes." Margaret spun toward the voice. Her hand reached for the small derringer hidden in her coat pocket. A man stepped from the shadows, grizzled, leathery, and shaped by years of desert sun. "Tom Morrison," he said. "Worked with your uncle. Been watching the place since he passed." Margaret lifted her chin. "I've come to stay." Tom's gaze traveled from her boots to her well-made traveling dress. "City girl like you? This land isn't kind to the soft." "Then I'll learn to be unkind," she answered, surprising even herself. Tom stared at her a long moment, then nodded. "Books are in the back room, but before you go thinking this is all business and ledgers, you should know something. This post sits near Apache land. Your uncle treated them fair. They did the same. You planning to do the same?" "I'm planning to treat anyone with fairness who comes in peace," Margaret said, another slow nod. "Maybe you'll survive out here after all." Over the next days, she learned more than she ever expected. She learned how to price coffee and flour, how to read her uncle's messy ledgers, and how to tell the difference between Apache herbs and Mexican ones. She learned that kindness could be a currency stronger than gold, and that people in this land watched every action more than they listened to any words. On her 4th day, the first Apache visitors came, 3 women, silent and proud. Margaret greeted them with a calm voice even as her heart raced. They traded beautiful beadworked moccasins for flour and peaches. When Margaret offered a small bag of coffee as a gift, the eldest woman's eyes softened with approval. "Your uncle was fair," she said. "Perhaps you will be too." Quote, Margaret's world slowly settled into a rhythm. She cleaned windows, rearranged shelves, and started a small garden behind the building. Every sunset found her sitting at the counter, reading her uncle's journals. One entry froze her breath. "The Apache saved my life today. A young warrior pulled me from a flash flood. I owe a debt that cannot be repaid." She wondered who that warrior had been. She wondered if she'd ever meet someone who carried that same mix of strength and wildness. Then came the night that changed everything. The storm hit with no warning. Thunder shook the walls, lightning lit up the desert like ghost fire, and the wind rattled every shutter. Tom had left for Tucson 2 days earlier, leaving Margaret alone with nothing but her rifle and her courage. A heavy thud struck the door. Once, twice. Margaret froze. Was it an outlaw? A lost traveler? An Apache? In the middle of a storm like this, anything was possible. Her father's words echoed in her mind. A lady should know when to be brave. She lifted her rifle, unbolted the door, and pulled it open. A man collapsed into her arms. His body was heavy with rain and blood. His dark hair was plastered to his face. His chest was marked with wounds, bullet holes torn through skin and muscle. His clothes were Apache. His weapons were Apache. But his breathing was shallow. desperate. Margaret dragged him inside, inch by inch. She pulled him to the small back room and cut away his soaked shirt. Scars covered his chest, old ones from battles long past, and 3 fresh wounds that still bled. She worked for hours. She boiled water, cleaned the wounds, packed them with what herbs she had, and whispered prayers she barely remembered. The storm faded, replaced by long stillness. Near dawn, he tossed in fever. He spoke in Apache, the words like wind over stone. Then, suddenly, his eyes opened. Dark, sharp. Awake, you are alone, he said in accented English. Yes, she whispered. Brave, he murmured, or foolish. Perhaps both. His gaze held hers in a way no man's ever had. What is your name? She asked. Nichi, he said, voice low. Means mischievous one. Quote. She felt a strange shiver run through her. Something in his voice, his eyes, his presence. It made the room feel smaller and wider all at once. Rest, she told him. But she already knew one thing for certain. Everything in her life was about to change. What if saving a stranger's life meant risking your own and your heart before you even understood why? For the next 3 days, Margaret hardly slept. Nichi drifted in and out of fever, sometimes whispering Apache words she didn't understand, sometimes waking with a sharp, alert stare that reminded her he was no helpless man. He watched her with the steady focus of someone who had learned long ago that danger could come at any moment. On the 4th morning, she found him sitting up on the edge of the cot. His wounds were still raw, but he moved with quiet strength. You should be resting, Margaret said, carrying a bowl of broth. I rest enough, Nichi answered. His voice was low and rough. Too much rest weakens the spirit. She crossed the room and held out the bowl. He took it carefully, his fingers brushing hers. The contact sparked something unexpected under her skin. She pulled back quickly, unsure what surprised her more, her reaction or his calm acceptance of it. You saved my life, he said after a moment. Why? The question hit her harder than she expected. She met his eyes. Because you needed help. Because it was right. He studied her face as if searching for any crack in her answer. Most would have left me outside. I'm not most. A ghost of a smile touched his lips. No, you're not. Later that afternoon, when she changed his bandages, she noticed a faint burned symbol on his shoulder. She froze. It was a cavalry mark, partially scarred over, but unmistakable. You served the army? She asked quietly. For a time. His jaw tightened. A mistake. One that cost me friends and made enemies. She remembered Tom's warnings, the stories she heard on the stagecoach, the whispers about Apache scouts who were hunted by both sides. You're running, she said softly. I'm surviving, Nichi corrected. There is a difference. Quote. That night, he woke from fever with a sharp gasp, whispering something in Apache. Margaret rushed to his side with cool water. When she touched his forehead, he caught her wrist, not roughly, but with instinctive strength. His eyes opened, dark and focused. You dream, she said. He released her slowly. Memories are not dreams. She sat on the edge of the bed. For the first time, she noticed the long scar along his ribs, the smaller ones across his chest, each mark telling a story she could only guess at. You've lived a hard life, she murmured. So have you, he answered quietly. Different kind of hard. The honesty in his voice made her chest tighten in a strange, warm way. The next morning, Tom returned from Tucson. Margaret met him outside, nerves twisting in her stomach. We have a guest, she tried to say casually. But Tom's sharp eyes caught everything. The extra firewood beside the door, the missing medical supplies, the tension in her voice. Apache? He asked. Margaret didn't answer. She didn't have to. Tom pushed past her and stepped into the back room. Nichi was already standing, lean, steady, and calm, despite the faint strain in his posture. The two men stared at each other for a long, heavy moment. I know you, Tom finally said. "Nichi, you scouted with my patrol years ago." Nichi's expression barely changed. "Tom Morrison, you always talked too much." Tom snorted. "Still do." Margaret held her breath. "You planning to bring trouble here?" Tom asked bluntly. "No," Nichi said. "I plan to leave when I am strong." "Fair enough." Tom stepped back. "Then heal fast. Folks been asking questions." Margaret exhaled shakily. She hadn't realized how tense she'd been until relief washed through her. That evening, as the sun dipped behind the red cliffs, Nichi walked slowly across the yard, stretching his healing muscles. Margaret followed him with her arms crossed, pretending she wasn't watching every careful step. "You walk like a man used to open skies," she teased. "And you watch like a woman used to danger," he replied. She felt her cheeks warm. "I'm learning." He stopped and faced her. The wind lifted a strand of her hair. His eyes followed the movement, something thoughtful behind his gaze. "You are different from other white women," he said. "You mean stubborn." "Strong," he corrected. "Brave. Curious." Her heart thumped harder. Curious. The word hung between them, heavy and delicate. "Curious?" she echoed. "Yes," his voice lowered. "About the world. About people. About things you've never seen." She swallowed. Something deep inside her responded to the quiet intensity in his tone. Before she could speak, gunfire cracked in the distance. They both stiffened. Tom rushed around the corner of the store, rifle ready. "Riders on the ridge," he warned. "Soldiers. Looks like Captain Morrison's boys." Nichi's jaw tightened. "They hunt me." "They won't find you," Margaret said fiercely. But Nichi shook his head. "You saved me. Now you carry my danger." "You're not a danger," she insisted. He looked at her with something almost like sorrow. "You do not understand the storm that follows me." "Then teach me," she said. "Show me." Quote. His expression softened, only slightly, but enough for her to feel it like a flame warming her chest. "You should not ask that," he said. "Why not?" "Because once you learn, you will not be the same." Margaret stepped closer. She didn't know why. She didn't know what she was doing, only that she couldn't look away from him. "Maybe I'm not meant to stay the same." Their eyes held for a long, breathless moment. The air around them felt different, charged like the sky before lightning. Then Nichi whispered, almost to himself, "Dangerous woman." And for the first time, he smiled. Not the faint ghost from before. A real smile, warm, slow, and so unexpected, it stole Margaret's breath. Before either of them could say more, Tom shouted from the porch, "Soldiers heading this way. Get inside." Margaret felt her pulse race. Not from fear, but from something she didn't yet have the words for. Because she knew, deep down, that everything in her life was about to shift again. And this time, she wasn't sure she wanted to stop it. What if the moment you finally found where you belonged was the same moment the world tried hardest to tear it away from you? The soldiers came at dusk. Their horses thundered down the ridge, kicking up trails of red dust. Margaret stood inside the trading post doorway, gripping her shotgun, trying to breathe steady as the sound grew louder. Tom took position near the windows. Nichi stepped quietly behind the shelves, keeping to the shadows. Captain Morrison led the group. His pale eyes scanned the yard like a man hunting ghosts. "Miss Hayes," he called, "we have reason to believe you're hiding an Apache fugitive." Margaret stepped onto the porch before Tom could stop her. "Do you have a warrant?" she asked, keeping her voice steady. Morrison smirked. "I don't need one for savages." "You need one for my property," she said sharply. "This is America, Captain, not your personal kingdom." A murmur rose among the soldiers. Morrison's jaw tightened. "You think you can protect him?" he sneered. "You think an Apache would risk his life for you?" Quote. Margaret's heart thudded, not with fear, but with the fierce knowledge that her answer would change everything. "Yes," she said, "just as I risked mine for him." Morrison opened his mouth to strike back, but he froze, because Nichi stepped out of the shadows. He walked into the open, slow and steady, like a man who refused to be hunted anymore. Morrison's face twisted in triumph. "There he is!" Then Nichi spoke. "You have no proof I did what you claim, no witnesses, no truth, only hate." The desert wind hissed between them. Margaret stood a half step closer to Nichi, her shoulders squared. She didn't touch him, but she didn't need to. Her presence said everything. Morrison's eyes snapped to their closeness. "So it's true, you've let him corrupt you." "He opened my eyes," Margaret said, "to truth, to courage, to what's right." Morrison's hand dropped to his revolver. "Then you're a traitor, too." Before he could pull the gun, the distinct click of rifles echoed through the night. Soldiers looked around sharply, startled. Tom held his rifle steady. Several Apache men appeared from the rocks beyond the trading post, bows drawn, silent as stone. White Eagle stepped forward, his voice calm. "She protected our kin. Now we protect her." The air grew tight, stretched thin between war and peace. Morrison looked from the Apache to Tom to Margaret and Nichi standing together, and he realized he didn't have the numbers for the fight he wanted. But hate didn't give up easily. "This isn't over," he growled. "You're all playing with fire." "Then let it burn you," Margaret said. "Not us." Morrison snarled, signaled his men, and turned his horse. They rode off into the falling night. Only when the sound faded did Margaret's knees soften. Nichi caught her arm gently. "You didn't have to stand with me," he said softly. "Yes," she whispered, "I did." He brushed a strand of hair from her face. "You are brave in ways my people honor." "And you are brave in ways I'm still learning," she said. White Eagle approached them. "More trouble will come." "But you have allies." Margaret nodded. "Thank you. Tell your families they are always welcome here." The Apache began to slip back into the desert one by one. White Eagle paused. "You and Nichi walk one path now," he said. "Walk it with open eyes." When they left, silence settled over the post. Margaret looked up at Nichi. "They think we're together." Nichi searched her face with those dark, careful eyes. "Are we?" Her heart beat fast. "I don't know what this is yet, but I know I don't want you to leave." He exhaled slowly. Relief, hope, something warmer. "I won't leave," he said. "Not unless you ask me to." "I won't." And for the first time, she saw something break open in him, some wall he'd kept for years. The next days were calm, unexpectedly so. The sky stretched wide and bright. Horses moved lazily in the heat. Margaret caught herself glancing toward the back room whenever Nichi stepped out of sight. He moved easily now, ever watchful but softer with her than with the world. He helped her restock shelves, tended her small garden, repaired the fence behind the trading post. When they passed each other in the store, something electric brushed between them, a closeness neither dared name. One evening, as the sun sank gold behind the mesas, Margaret stood on the porch watching the desert glow. Nichi joined her silently, standing just near enough for warmth to pass between them. "You saved my life," he said quietly. "You saved mine first," she answered. "I owe you a debt." She shook her head. "No, you owe me honesty, nothing else." He took a breath. "Then you should know something. When you touched me that first night, when you cleaned my wounds, I had never been touched like that, with care." Her throat tightened. "I'm glad I did." His voice lowered. "And you have never seen a man's body." Her breath stopped. He wasn't teasing. He wasn't mocking. He was simply telling the truth, softly, openly, without shame. "No," she whispered, "I haven't." He held her gaze for a long moment. The desert winds hushed around them. "If you choose," he said, "I will teach you everything you wish to know, slowly, gently, with respect." The world seemed to pause. "I choose," she whispered. Nichi stepped closer. The heat between them rose. Not wild, but warm, steady, certain. He lifted her hand, brought it to his chest, and let her feel the strong, steady beat of his heart. "You may explore," he murmured, voice low, "for as long as you wish." Her fingers moved carefully along the scars she had once cleaned in fear. He let her trace every mark, every line, every shape of him. The desert darkened. the first stars appeared, and Margaret knew she was no longer the woman who arrived on a lonely stagecoach with nothing but trunks and fear. She had found something fierce and true, not just love. Freedom. Their world would still judge them. Morrison would return. The town would whisper. But she was no longer afraid, because she knew exactly who she was, and who stood beside her. Margaret Hayes and Nichi walked back inside together, closing the door, not in fear, but in choice. A new life beginning, a new story, one they would write with their own hands. And Margaret understood one thing for certain: some paths are worth every risk.